Joshua chapter 1. After the death of Moses, Yahweh spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, and the minister of Moses, and said to him, My servant Moses is dead. Therefore, the hour has come for you to cross the Jordan River, and all the people shall go with you to the land which I give to the sons of Israel. I give you all the places where you set your feet, as I promised Moses. Your frontiers will extend from the mountain of Lebanon in the north to the desert in the south, as far as the great Euphrates in the east and the great sea in the west. As long as you live, no one will be able to stand against you. I will be with you as I was with Moses. I will not leave you or abandon you. Be valiant and have courage, for I will give this people the land I swore to their fathers I would give them. Therefore, be brave and faithfully fulfill the whole law which Moses my servant gave you. Do not turn aside from it, either to the right or to the left, and you shall succeed wherever you go. Constantly read the book of this law, and meditate on it day and night, that you may truly do what it says. So shall your plans be fulfilled, and you shall succeed in everything. It is I who command you. Be strong then, and be valiant. Do not tremble or be afraid, because Yahweh your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua ordered the secretaries of the people, Pass through the camp and give this command. Store up enough food for, in 3 days' time, you shall cross the Jordan and enter the land which Yahweh your God will give you. To the people of the tribes of Reuben and Gad, and to half of the tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, Remember the command of Moses, the servant of Yahweh. Yahweh has provided you with a place of rest and has given you all this region. The women and children, as well as the livestock, shall remain on this side of the Jordan, in the region which Moses gave you. But you who are valiant shall cross over armed ahead of your brothers, and shall help them until Yahweh gives them rest, as He has given you, that they may also conquer the land which Yahweh our God gives them. So you shall return to the region which Moses gave us, and take possession of that land at the east of the Jordan. They answered Joshua, We will do all you have commanded us, and go wherever you send us. Just as we have obeyed Moses, so shall we obey you in the same way. May Yahweh your God be with you, as He was with Moses. He who contradicts your words and disobeys your orders shall die. But be valiant and courageous. Joshua chapter 2. Joshua sent 2 spies secretly from Shittim with the following order: Go and look over the land well, especially the city of Jericho. The spies went, and as soon as they came to Jericho, they went to the house of the prostitute named Rahab. But someone told the king of Jericho, Some Israelites have entered here tonight to spy on us. So the king of Jericho sent word to Rahab, Send those men out of your house, because they came to spy on the land. But the woman had hidden them. So she said, It is true, they came to my house, but I did not know where they came from. And at nightfall Shortly before the city gates were to be closed, they went out. I do not know where they went, but hurry, and you will surely overtake them. The woman had hidden them on the roof of the house under the stalks of flax, which she kept there. The pursuers went to search for them by the road leading to the valley of the Jordan, and as they went out, the city gates were closed. Then the woman went up to where she had hidden the spies of Joshua, and she said to them, I know that Yahweh your God has given this land to you. We are frightened, and the inhabitants of the land tremble before you. We know how Yahweh dried up the waters of the Red Sea to let you cross when you came out of Egypt. We know what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who lived at the other side of the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you destroyed by anathema. The news has frightened us, and everyone has lost courage because of you. For Yahweh your God is God in heaven above, as he is on earth below. Now then, swear to me by Yahweh that just as I have been faithful to you, so shall you be towards my family, and respect the life of my father, mother, brothers and sisters, and all that belong to them. The men answered, Provided that you do not reveal our talk, then we will pay back life for life when Yahweh hands over to us this land, and we will deal generously and faithfully with you. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, since her house was built into the city wall. But she said to them, Go through the mountains, so that you do not meet those who pursue you. Remain in hiding for 3 days, until they return, and then you may go your way. They answered, See how we shall fulfill our oath. When we enter this land, tie this scarlet cord as a sign on the window through which we have escaped. Bring into your house your father, mother, brothers and sisters, and all your relatives. If any of them leaves the house, he shall be the one responsible for his death, and the guilt will not be ours. But if anyone who is with you is killed, then may the punishment for his death come upon us. However, be careful not to reveal our plan. If you do, then we are freed from the oath we have sworn. Rahab said to them, So be it. And after she had sent them off, she tied the scarlet cord to the window. The men went into the mountains and hid there for 3 days, until their pursuers had returned. These men had searched in vain for them everywhere. Then the 2 spies came down again from the mountains, and crossing the Jordan River, came to Joshua son of Nun, and gave him an account of their mission and everything that had happened. They said to Joshua, Yahweh has given all this land into our hands. Their inhabitants already tremble before us. Joshua chapter 3. Early in the morning, Joshua rose and set out from Shittim with all the people of Israel, and came to the Jordan River. There they encamped while waiting to cross the river. After 3 days, the officers went around the camp and ordered the Israelites, When you see the ark of the covenant of Yahweh go by, carried by the priests from the tribe of Levi, then you shall set out from your camp and follow it, that you may know the way you shall go, because you have never been that way before. But you shall follow it at a distance of 1,000 meters. Do not go near it. Joshua said to the Israelites, Purify yourselves, for tomorrow Yahweh will be in your midst doing wonders. And Joshua ordered the priests, "Take the Ark of the Covenant and cross the river at the head of the people." Then Yahweh said to Joshua, "Today I will begin to make you great in the eyes of Israel, and they shall know that I am with you as I was with Moses. Give this order to the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant. As soon as you come to the banks of the Jordan, stand still in the river." And Joshua said to the Israelites, "Come nearer and listen to the words of Yahweh our God. Do you want a sign that Yahweh, the living God, is in your midst, He who drives away before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, as well as the Girgashites, Jebusites, and Amorites? See, the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of all the earth is going to cross the Jordan before you. Now choose 12 men from the 12 tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. When the priests who carry the Ark of the Lord of all the earth put their feet into the water of the Jordan, the water coming from upstream shall stop flowing and stand in one single mass. When the people set out from their camp to cross the Jordan, the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant went before them. There was much water in the Jordan, for it was overflowing its banks at this time of the barley harvest. Nevertheless, when those who carried the ark went down to the river, and their feet touched the edge of the water from upstream stopped flowing. The water stood still, forming something like a dam very far from that place, near Adam, the neighboring city of Zarethan. The water flowing down to the Dead Sea was completely cut off, and so the people could cross opposite Jericho. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant remained in the middle of the river, which dried up, until all the Israelites had crossed the Jordan. Joshua chapter 4. Once the whole nation crossed, Yahweh said to Joshua, "Choose 12 men, one from each tribe, and give them the following order. Take 12 stones from the riverbed of the Jordan, from the very place where the priests stood still. Bring them with you and put them where you will encamp tonight." Joshua then called the 12 men he had chosen from the 12 tribes of Israel and ordered them, "Walk to the ark up to the middle of the Jordan and take from there a stone for each tribe and carry it upon your shoulder. They will remain with you as a sign of what happened, so that when your children ask you in the future, 'What do these stones mean for you?' you may answer, 'When the ark of Yahweh crossed the Jordan, the water parted before it. So these stones shall serve as a memorial to the Israelites forever.'" The Israelites carried out Joshua's order and picked up 12 stones from the riverbed of the Jordan, one for each tribe, just as Yahweh had ordered Joshua. They brought these to the place where they encamped and placed them there. Joshua piled up 12 stones on the riverbed of the Jordan at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant stood. They are still there to this day. The priests who carried the ark stood in the middle of the Jordan until Joshua finished saying everything that Yahweh had ordered him. Then, when all the people had finished crossing the river, the ark also crossed, and the priests walked at the head of the people again. The men from the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh went ahead armed, as Moses had ordered them to do. They were about 40,000, well armed, and they marched before Yahweh, ready for battle, to the plains of Jericho. On that day, Yahweh exalted Joshua before all Israel, and henceforth they respected him all the days of his life, as they had done with Moses. Yahweh said to Joshua, "Command the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant to come up from the Jordan." Joshua therefore ordered them to come up from the river. And when these priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of Yahweh came up from the middle of the Jordan, when their feet touched the banks, the waters of the Jordan returned as abundantly as on previous days and overflowed its banks. It was on the 10th day of the first month when the people came up out of the Jordan and encamped in Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. There in Gilgal, Joshua set up the 12 stones taken from the riverbed of the Jordan. Then Joshua said to the Israelites, "When your children ask you in the future what these stones mean, then you shall tell them that the people of Israel crossed the Jordan without getting their feet wet. For Yahweh our God dried up the waters of the Jordan before us, just as he did to the Red Sea, which he also dried up before us to let us cross. He did this so that the people of this land may know the power of Yahweh our God, and that you yourselves may fear him forever." Joshua chapter 5. The kings of the Amorites on the west of the Jordan, and all the kings of the Canaanites who lived in the neighboring lands of the Mediterranean Sea, came to know how Yahweh dried up the bed of the Jordan for the Israelites to cross. So they lost their courage and spirit to face the Israelites. At that time, Yahweh said to Joshua, "Make flint knives and celebrate a new circumcision for the sons of Israel." Joshua obeyed the order of Yahweh and circumcised the Israelites at a place called the Hill of the Foreskins. This is the reason why Joshua did this second circumcision. All the men of Israel who left Egypt were circumcised, but they died during their journey in the desert. But all those born in the desert were not circumcised, for the Israelites walked in the desert for 40 years until the whole nation died, the whole generation who did not obey Yahweh. For Yahweh had sworn that they would not enter the land flowing with milk and honey, which he promised to their ancestors. But it was their children whom Joshua circumcised. After circumcising all, they rested in the camp until they were healed. Then Yahweh said to Joshua, "Today I have removed from you the shame of Egypt." So the place is called Gilgal up to this day. The Israelites encamped in Gilgal, where they celebrated the Passover on the evening of the 14th day of the month in the plains of Jericho. On the following day, they ate of the produce of the land, unleavened bread and roasted grain on that very day. And from that day on, when they ate of the produce of the land, the manna ceased. There was no more manna for the Israelites, and that year they ate of the fruit of the land of Canaan. When Joshua was near Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and saw before him a man with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua approached him and said, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" And he answered, "No, I have come as the commander of the army of Yahweh. Joshua lay prostrate on the ground, worshipped him, and said, "What does my Lord ask of his servant?" The commander of the army of Yahweh said to him, "Take off your sandals from your feet. The place where you stand is holy." And Joshua did so. Joshua chapter 6. The inhabitants of Jericho had closed the city and had fastened their walls so that the Israelites could not enter. No one came in and no one went out. But Yahweh said to Joshua, "I will give you the city, its king, and all its men of war. For this you shall have to go around the city once every day for 6 days. 7 priests shall go before the ark, bearing the 7 trumpets used in the time of the Jubilee. On the 7th day they shall march around the city 7 times, and when they blow the horn, all the people shall come up to attack, shouting their battle cry. At that moment the walls of the city will fall, and everyone shall enter straight ahead of him." Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, "You shall carry the ark of the covenant. 7 priests shall go ahead with the trumpets they use for the Jubilee." Then Joshua said to the people, "You shall march around the city as the vanguard of the army shall go before the ark of Yahweh." When Joshua finished speaking, the priests began to blow the 7 trumpets they used to blow on the feast of the Jubilee, and they went before the ark of Yahweh. The vanguard of the people went before the priests, and the rest of the people came after the ark. The trumpets blew continually. Joshua had given this order: "Do not shout or utter anything, nor let even a single word be heard, until the day comes when I say, 'Shout and cry out.'" That day he had the ark of Yahweh carried around the city once. Then all returned to the camp where they spent the night. On the following day Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took the ark, and those who blew the 7 trumpets again went before the ark. The vanguard went before them, and the rest followed the ark while the trumpets blew. So they did the next day, and for 6 days they marched once a day around the city, and then returned to the camp. On the 7th day the Israelites rose early at dawn and marched around Jericho in the same way as on the previous days. But on that day they did it 7 times. At the 7th time, as the priests blew the trumpets, Joshua ordered the people, "Shout your battle cry, for Yahweh has given you the city. The city and all that is in it shall be given in anathema to Yahweh. Only Rahab the prostitute, with all who may be with her in her house, shall live, since she hid the spies we sent. But for your part, be careful not to touch anything, big or small, since everything shall be consecrated in anathema. Do not take anything for yourself, lest the curse be upon the camp of Israel, and bring trouble upon it. All the gold, silver, copper, and iron are to be consecrated to Yahweh, and shall go into the treasury of Yahweh." The people shouted, and the trumpets blew. At this precise moment, the walls of the city fell. Then everyone went straight into the city to the place before him. They seized Jericho, and with sword in hand, they killed all the men and women, both young and old, as well as the oxen, sheep, and asses, and they gave these as anathema or rather sacrificed them to God. 2 men had been sent to explore Jericho, and upon entering the city were hidden by a prostitute. Then Joshua said to them, "Go into the house of the prostitute, and bring her out with all her family, as you had sworn to her." These young men then brought out the woman named Rahab, her father, her mother, her brothers and sisters, with all her relatives to safety outside the camp of Israel. Afterwards, they burned the city and all that was in it. They saved only the silver, gold, and the vessels of bronze and iron, which they put with the precious things in the sanctuary of Yahweh. Joshua saved the prostitute and all her family, and she lived in Israel, because she had kept the spies sent by Joshua. Joshua asked the people to pronounce this curse: "May Yahweh curse the man who rebuilds Jericho. May its foundation rise on the body of his eldest son, and the gates on that of his youngest son." So Yahweh was with Joshua and made him famous in all the land. Joshua chapter 7. The Israelites did not keep the anathema. It happened that Achan, son of Carmi, son of Sabdi, son of Serah of the tribe of Judah, appropriated for himself some of the things consecrated by anathema, and because of this, the anger of Yahweh burned against Israel. Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which was near Bethaven, east of the city of Bethel, and he said to them, "Go up and explore the land." The spies said to Joshua on their return, "It would not be necessary to mobilize the whole army. Some 2,000 or 3,000 men will be enough to conquer the land. It would be useless to tire the people, for that nation is but few in number." So about 3,000 men attacked Ai, but were repulsed by the city's defenders. The people of Ai killed 36 men and pursued them outside the gate as far as Shebarim, defeating them on the slopes. Upon seeing this, all the people were disheartened. Then Joshua and all the leaders of Israel rent their garments, put ashes on their heads, and remained prostrate before the ark of Yahweh until evening. Joshua lamented, "Alas, Yahweh, why have you made this people cross the river Jordan just to give us into the hands of the Amorites who will destroy us? It would have been better for us to remain on the other side of the Jordan. Yahweh, my God, what can I say when I see Israel fleeing from their enemies? The Canaanites and all the inhabitants of this land will know of this. They will unite to surround us and drive us out. And you, what are you going to do for the honor of your name?" Yahweh answered, "Stand up. Why are you prostrate on the ground? Israel sinned and has violated my covenant. Israelites have taken from what was set apart by anathema and have hidden stolen objects with their belongings. So Israel cannot face its enemies, but shall flee from them, since it has come to be an anathema. I will not be with you any more, unless you remove the curse from your midst. Go then and sanctify the people. Say to them, Cleanse yourselves, for tomorrow Yahweh, the God of Israel, says to you, O Israel, the anathema is in your midst, and you shall not face your enemies until you have removed the anathema from you. Therefore, in the morning you shall come near, grouped according to tribes, The tribe that Yahweh designates by lot shall present itself by families, and the family that Yahweh designates shall present itself by households, and the household by individuals. He who turns out to be responsible for this offense shall be burned together with all his household goods for having violated the covenant of Yahweh and having done a detestable crime in Israel. Joshua rose early in the morning and ordered the tribes of Israel to present themselves. The lot fell on the tribe of Judah. Lots were drawn among the families, and the family of Sarah was left. Lots were drawn among the households of this family, and the household of Zabdi was left. And then lots were drawn among the members of this household, which revealed that the guilty one was Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Sore, of the tribe of Judah. Joshua then said to him, "My son, confess the truth before Yahweh, the God of Israel, and render him praise. Tell me what you have done without hiding anything." Achan answered, "It is true that I have sinned against Yahweh. This is what I have done. I saw among the plunder a beautiful mantle from Shinar, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels. I was tempted, so I took them. Then I hid them in the ground inside my tent with the silver underneath." Joshua then sent some messengers who ran to the tent of Achan and found the booty inside the tent with the silver underneath. They took all these and presented them to Joshua and to the people. Everything was put before Yahweh. Then Joshua took Achan together with the silver, the mantle and the gold, his sons as well as his daughters, his oxen, asses and sheep, his tent and all that he had. All Israel accompanied him, and they brought them to the valley of Achor. There Joshua said to him, "Since you brought us misfortune, may Yahweh bring this misfortune upon you today." Then all the people stoned him, and of those that were his, some were crushed, and others were burned. They piled on him a great heap of stones that remains to this day. Then the Lord turned from his anger. Henceforth the place was called the Valley of Achor. Joshua chapter 8. Then Yahweh said to Joshua, "Do not fear or be discouraged. March with all your warriors against the city of Ai. I will give into your hands its king and its people, the city and its territory. You shall deal with Ai as you have dealt with Jericho and its king. But you may take possession of the plunder and all the animals. So now prepare an ambush behind the city." So Joshua left with all his warriors and went up to Ai. Then he chose 30,000 valiant warriors and sent them out by night. And he commanded them, "Lie in ambush behind the city. Do not go very far and be ready. I and all the people who are with me shall close in on the city. But when they come out against us, as they did before, we shall flee from them. Then they shall pursue us and go out far from the city, thinking that we are fleeing from them as before. But then you shall rise from where you are hiding and occupy the city. Yahweh our God will give it to us. After taking the city, you shall burn it according to what Yahweh has commanded. These are my orders." So Joshua sent them out And they went to the place of ambush between Bethel and Ai, to the west of the city, while Joshua slept that night in the midst of his people. Very early in the morning, Joshua rose and mustered his army, and then marched at the head of the people, accompanied by the leaders. All the warriors who were with him went up and marched until they reached the front of the city. Then they encamped opposite the northern side of the city. The valley separated them from the city. Then he took 5,000 men, whom he set in ambush between Bethel and Ai, to the west of the city. The people then set up their camp to the north of the city, and their rear guard to the west. That night Joshua was in the valley. When the king of Ai saw the situation, he made haste with all his people to attack Israel on the slope opposite the valley of Jordan, without knowing that the Israelites had prepared an ambush behind the city. Joshua and the Israelites pretended that they were being defeated, and so fled to the road leading to the wilderness. Then all the people of the city began to shout and left to pursue them. No one remained to defend the city, and they left the city open. Then Yahweh said to Joshua, "Stretch out toward Ai the javelin you have in your hand, because I have given you this city." So Joshua did this, and at this sign the warriors rose out of their places in the ambush and ran to the city. They entered and seized the city and set it on fire. The men of Ai looked back and saw the smoke of the city rising up to heaven, and at the same time the Israelites who were fleeing turned back upon them. They lost their courage as they were trapped by the Israelites. For on one side were Joshua and all the people of Israel, and on the other those who had just set the city on fire. The Israelites killed them until none were left to survive or to escape. Only the king of Ai was taken alive, and they brought him to Joshua. The Israelites killed the inhabitants of Ai who went into the fields or who fled to the wilderness. They killed them all. Then they returned to the city and killed all by the sword. The total of those who fell that day was 12,000. Joshua did not give the order to stop the war until all the inhabitants of Ai had been killed in accordance with anathema. But the Israelites took for themselves the livestock and plunder as Yahweh had commanded. Joshua burned the city and left it in ruins. That place has remained as it was to this day. As for the king of Ai, Joshua had him hanged on a tree until the sun set. Then he had his body taken down. They cast it at the entrance of the city and raised over it a great heap of stones, which can be seen to this day. Joshua then built an altar to Yahweh, the God of Israel, on Mount Ebal. He fulfilled what Moses had commanded the children of Israel. And according to what is written in the book of the law of Moses, the altar was made of uncut stones and was built without the use of an iron tool. On this altar, he offered burnt offerings and peace offerings to Yahweh. There, in the presence of the Israelites, he wrote upon the stones a copy of the law which Moses had written. All the people stood on both sides of the ark with their leaders, secretaries, and judges. Opposite it were the priests and the Levites who carried the ark of Yahweh. Israelites by birth and aliens were together, Half the people were in front of Mount Gerizim, and the other half were near Mount Ebal, according to Moses' commandment for the blessing of Israel. Joshua proceeded to read the words of blessing and curse, and all that is written in the book of the law. He did not omit any word from all that was written by Moses. He read it with a loud voice before the assembly of all Israel, including women, children, and foreigners who lived among them. Joshua chapter 9. The kings who lived west of the Jordan, on the mountain, on the plain, and on the sea coast heard of these events. The Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites made a pact and came to an agreement to fight as one against Joshua and Israel. The inhabitants of Gibeon came to know what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, and decided to deceive the Israelites. They prepared provisions for themselves, loaded some worn-out, torn, and mended sacks and wineskins on their asses, put on worn-out and patched sandals and clothes. For their journey, they brought some dry bread broken into pieces. Then they went to Joshua to the camp at Gilgal and said to him, "We come from a far land to make a pact with you." The Israelites answered, "Do you live near us? If so, then we cannot make a pact with you." They answered Joshua, "We are your servants." And Joshua asked them, "Who are you? Where do you come from?" They answered, "Your servants come from a very far country, and through the greatness of Yahweh your God, we came to know of his power and all that he did in Egypt, and with the 2 kings of the Amorites who reigned in the eastern part of the Jordan, Sihon the king of Heshbon, and Og the king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth. The leaders and the rest of the inhabitants of our country told us, 'Take provisions for a long journey. Go out to meet them and say to them, "We are your servants. May you make a covenant with us. Look at our bread, which was warm when you took it from our houses to come and meet you. But see how dry it has become and how it has broken into pieces. These wineskins that was filled up with wine were new. Now they are ripped and worn out. The cloths and sandals that we use have worn out because of the very long journey." The Israelites shared their food with them without having asked Yahweh what must be done. Joshua made a covenant with them without waiting for any answer from Yahweh. So he, as well as the leaders of the community, promised to let them live. 3 days later, the Israelites learned that these people lived near their own territory. On hearing this, the Israelites set out and entered their cities, Gibeon, Chephirah, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. They spared their lives because of what the leaders of the people had sown to them by the name of Yahweh. But all the people criticized their leaders. Then all the leaders said to them, "We have sown by the name of Yahweh, therefore we cannot kill them. But this we can do. We shall let them live, so that the anger of Yahweh may not be upon us, but they shall serve by cutting firewood and fetching water for the community of Israel." Then Joshua summoned the Gibeonites and told them about the decision of the leaders. "Why did you deceive us and say to us that you come from very far, when in fact you live right in our midst? Henceforth you are cursed and shall always cut wood and fetch water for the house of my God. The Gibeonites answered, We came to know that Yahweh had commanded Moses to destroy all the inhabitants of the land he gave you. We were afraid, so we opted for this measure. And now we are in your hands. Do with us whatever seems good and just to you. Joshua fulfilled his promise and did not let the Israelites kill them. But from that day on, they cut firewood and fetched water for the whole community and for the altar of Yahweh in the place he would choose. Joshua chapter 10. Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, came to know how Joshua had conquered and leveled Ai, doing to it and its king what he had done to Jericho and its king. He also knew how the Gibeonites had made peace with the Israelites and were living in their midst. He feared greatly, for Gibeon was a very important city, a royal city greater than Ai, and its men were very brave. In view of this, Adoni-Zedek sent for Hoham, king of Hebron, for Aram, king of Jarmuth, for Japhia, king of Lachish, and for Debir, king of Eglon, saying, Come and help me conquer Gibeon, for it has made a pact with Joshua and the Israelites. So the 5 kings of the Amorites, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces and set out, each one with troops. They encamped opposite Gibeon and surrounded it. The Gibeonites sent word to Joshua at the camp in Gilgal, Do not leave us alone, but come and help us, for all the Amorite kings who live on the mountains have united against us. So Joshua left Gilgal that day with all his valiant warriors. Then Yahweh said to Joshua, Do not be afraid, because I have placed them in your hands, and no one among them will be able to stand up against you. Joshua marched from Gilgal, journeying throughout the night, and came upon the Amorites by surprise. Yahweh defeated them. The Israelites gained a great victory in Gibeon and pursued the Amorites by the slope of Beth-horon up to Azekah and Makkedah. As they were fleeing, Yahweh rained huge hailstones on them and pursued them up to Azekah, and they were killed. There were more who died because of the hailstones than by the sword of the Israelites. On that day, when Yahweh gave the Amorites over to them, Joshua addressed Yahweh and said in the sight of all Israel, Sun, stand still at Gibeon, and you moon in the valley of Aijalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the people had taken revenge on their enemies. So it is written in the book of the just, The sun stood still in mid-heaven, and did not hasten to set for almost a whole day. There has not been a day like this before or after, in which Yahweh obeyed the order of a man. It was Yahweh who fought for Israel. Then Joshua and all Israel returned to the camp at Gilgal. But the 5 kings fled and hid themselves in a cave at Makkedah. And so it was told to Joshua, We have found the 5 kings. They are hiding in a cave at Makkedah. So Joshua ordered, Roll great stones against the entrance of the cave, and set men to guard it. But do not stay there. Pursue your enemies, and fall upon their rear. Do not let them return to their cities, for Yahweh our God has placed them in our hands. Joshua and the Israelites destroyed and finished them off. Only a few survivors were left, who took refuge in the fortified cities, while all Israel returned unscathed to the camp with Joshua. Henceforth, no one dared challenge them. Then Joshua ordered, "Open the entrance of the cave, take the 5 kings out, and bring them to me." They did this and brought the 5 kings before Joshua, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Lachish, Jarmuth, and Eglon. Joshua assembled all Israel and said to the captains of the troops, "Come here and step on the necks of these kings." So they came near and put their feet on the necks of the kings. Then Joshua said to them, "Do not be afraid or lose courage. Be valiant and firm, for Yahweh will do so to all your enemies against whom you will fight." Joshua immediately put them to death by hanging them on 5 trees until evening. At nightfall, they took down the bodies of the kings and threw them into the same cave where they had hidden and closed it with great stones, which remain there to this day. On that same day, Joshua seized Makkedah. He slew its king and its inhabitants, and he consecrated it and all that was in it in anathema to Yahweh, without sparing anyone. The king suffered the same fate as did the king of Jericho. Then Joshua and all Israel went to attack Libnah. Yahweh gave the city and its king to the Israelites, and they put to the sword all its inhabitants without sparing anyone. The king met the same fate as the king of Jericho. From Libnah, Joshua went to Lachish, laid siege to it, and attacked it. Yahweh also gave them this city, and its king and inhabitants suffered the same fate as Libnah. Then Horam, king of Gezer, came to help Lachish, but Joshua destroyed him together with all his people, without leaving anyone alive. From Lachish he then went to Eglon. He besieged it and conquered it on the same day. The king and the inhabitants of Eglon were also put to death by the sword. They consecrated the city in anathema as they had done to Lachish. From Eglon they went to Hebron. Joshua conquered it together with all the towns which were subject to it, put to the sword its king and all its inhabitants, without letting anyone survive. He consecrated it in anathema as he had dealt with Eglon. Joshua and all Israel with him turned back to Debir and attacked it. He took it as well as the towns subject to it. He put to the sword its king and inhabitants, consecrating them in anathema, without sparing anyone. Debir and its king received the same punishment as Hebron and Libnah. In this way, Joshua struck the whole region of the mountains, the Negev desert, the plains and the mountain slopes with their kings. He did not let anyone survive, but consecrated all living beings in anathema, according to what Yahweh had commanded. Joshua destroyed them all from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza, and from Goshen to Gibeon. Joshua defeated all these kings and seized all these lands in one single campaign, because Yahweh fought for Israel. Then he and all Israel returned to their camp at Gilgal. Joshua chapter 11. When Jabin, king of Assur, came to know all this, he sent ambassadors to Jobab, king of Madon, to the king of Shimron, to the king of Akshaf, to the kings in the northern mountains, on the steppes to the south of Kinneroth, in the plains, and in the heights of Dor on the west, to the Canaanites in the east and the west, to the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, and Jebusites in the mountains, and the Hivites at the foot of Mount Hermon in the region of Mizpah. And they set out with their troops, a multitude as numerous as the sand of the sea, accompanied by a great number of horses and chariots, ready for combat. All these kings joined forces and encamped together at the spring of Merom to attack Israel. Then Yahweh said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid, for tomorrow at this hour I will give them to you, that you may sacrifice them to me. Cut the hocks of their horses and burn their chariots of war." So Joshua and all the armed men with him went to Merom and attacked them by surprise. Yahweh gave them into the hand of Israel. The Israelites destroyed and pursued them as far as Great Sidon and Misrephoth-Maim, and as far as Mizpah to the east, without leaving anyone alive. Joshua also carried out what Yahweh had commanded, cutting the hocks of the horses and burning the chariots. At once Joshua turned back and conquered Hazor and killed its king. At that time, Hazor was the capital of all those kingdoms. He put to the sword all the inhabitants of that city, consecrating it in anathema. No one was left alive, and they immediately set the city on fire. Joshua took all the cities of these kings and all their kings and consecrated them in anathema, according to what Moses, the servant of Yahweh, had commanded. Israel set on fire all the cities except those lying on the slopes and on the heights. Of these, only Hazor was burned by Joshua. The Israelites divided among themselves the plunder and the livestock of these cities, but they put to the sword the whole population without sparing anyone. So what Yahweh had commanded Moses and what Moses had entrusted to Joshua was completely fulfilled. Joshua did not neglect anything that Yahweh had commanded Moses. So Joshua conquered all this land, the mountains, the Negeb, Goshen, the plains, the steppes, and the mountains of Israel with its plains. From the region of the mountain range that rises up to Seir, as far as Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon, to the foot of Mount Hermon, he destroyed all their kings, vanquishing and killing them. The war Joshua waged against these kings lasted a long time. There was no city that made peace with the Israelites except the Hivites of Gibeon. All were conquered. Yahweh gave all of them courage to fight against Israel, so that at the end they could be consecrated in anathema and destroyed without pity, as Yahweh had commanded Moses. At that time, Joshua came back and wiped out the Anakim from the mountains, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, and from all the mountains of Judah and Israel. They and their cities were given in anathema. No Anakim was left in the land of Israel, except in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. Joshua seized the whole land as Yahweh had directed Moses, and gave it as an inheritance to the Israelites, to be distributed among their tribes. With this, the land rested from war. Joshua chapter 12. These are the kings of the country whom the Israelites defeated, taking their land beyond the Jordan eastward, from the valley of Arnon to Mount Hermon, including all the lowland. Sihon, king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon and ruled from Aroer, which is on the edge of the Arnon. The border was at the middle of the valley, as far as the Jabbok river, that was the boundary with the Ammonites. To him belonged half of Gilead, and the lowland from the east side of the lake of Kinneroth to the Beth Jashimot road, on the east side of the sea of the lowland, that is the Salt Sea, at the foot of the slopes of Pisgah. Og, king of Bashan, one of the survivors of the Rephaim, who lived at Ashtaroth and Edrei, ruled over Mount Hermon, Salekah, and all Bashan to the boundary of the Geshurites and the Maccathites, and over half of Gilead beyond the land of Sihon, king of Heshbon. Moses, the servant of Yahweh, with the Israelites, defeated them, and Moses gave their land to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and of the tribe of Manasseh as their inheritance. Now these are the kings of the country whom Joshua and the Israelites defeated on the west side of the Jordan, from Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon to Mount Halak rising towards Seir. This is the land that Joshua divided among the tribes of Israel, the hill country and the lowlands, the Arabah, the hillside, the wilderness and the Negev. This land had belonged to the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And these were the defeated kings: king of Jericho, king of Ai near Bethel, king of Jerusalem, king of Hebron, king of Jarmuth, king of Lachish, king of Eglon, king of Geser, king of Debir, king of Geder, king of Hormah, king of Harad, king of Libnah, king of Adullam, king of Makkedah, king of Bethel, king of Tappuah, king of Epher, king of Aphek, king of Sharon, king of Madon, king of Hasor, king of Simon, king of Akshaf, king of Tanak, king of Megiddo, king of Kadesh, king of Jokneam in Carmel, king of Dor on the hillside of Dor, king of Goyim in Galilee, and king of Tirzah. Total number of all these kings, 31.